you're watching Bread and Roses, a weekly political social television magazine on New Channel TV. I'm Mariam Namazi and I'm presenting this week's program with my fantastic co-host, Fariroz Puya.
Hello.
In this week's program, we're going to be discussing the question of why secularism is such an important response to the religious right, to Islamism and to groups like the Islamic State. We'll be discussing the fantastic 11th to 12th October conference that we had in London on the religious right, secularism and civil rights as well. And as usual, we will have an insane fatwa of the week and insane news of the week as well. But before we go to our program, let's hear a little background clip on the issue. Stay with us. The global rise of the religious right, including but not limited to Islamic State or ISIS, and their efforts to gain political power and control the state apparatus and public institutions has meant that organized religion's role vis-à-vis the state, as well as secularism and the complete separation of religion from the state, have become critical political and civil rights matters for our era. Well, you know, these are some of the issues that we discussed at the conference that we held on the 11th to 12th of October in London. And I think one of the things that the conference helped to show was just the depth and breadth of resistance against the religious right, against Islamism, but other forms of religious right as well, from the Hindu right in India to the Buddhist right in a place like Sri Lanka, and of course the Christian right as well as the Jewish right in a place like Israel. And I think in that sense, what became very clear is that this fight for secularism, you know, we're often told is a fight that's, you know, not relevant to a lot of the world. In fact, what a lot of speakers at the conference showed is that it's something that is deeply demanded and desired and fought for, you know, tooth and nail in many countries across the world, in many corners across the world.
I agree. I think the conference put secularism on a map, and not only put secularism on a map, showed everybody else the huge secular movement. It gave the secular movement an opportunity to see itself as a huge force globally, and they came together and you know, they realized they've got such a power, and the significance of the role of secularism as a major force for good in globally in opposition to the huge right-wing rise of the right-wing movement that we've seen in the last 20-30 years. And now is the time, the tide is turning, and it's time for people to realize, in particular the secularists across the world, to realize they're a huge force and they have a historical responsibility. I think that's really put that question on the map, and I think everybody recognized, you know, that's the message I think I got from the conference. That's the first thing and the most important thing I got from the conference.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I think one of the important things of the conference was it just showed how strong secularists are, really. You know, sometimes you do, when you're faced with the brutality and really the barbarity of groups like the Islamic State, you do often, a lot of people might feel hopeless. And I think one of the things that the conference did is to show that there is a lot of hope, because where there is resistance, there is courage and there is hope. And I think it's important for people to be able to see that, and to see that they're not alone, that this is a fight that many people are fighting on many different levels in every corner of the globe, even in the smallest villages, even in countries that you would think, you know, has been, you know, suppressed for very long by the religious right. It's not the case. That there is that resistance coming, you know, taking place all the time. And also, how many people have fallen to this movement, have been killed by this movement, but nonetheless, how many more are rising up and continuing the fight that, you know, others have fallen as a result of.
And I think the other significant issue that came out in the conference, and I noticed, was, as you said, there are different levels of the secularist movement. From critical movement which criticizes the religious and religious right, defends women's right, and actually shows the depth of the reactionary nature of this right-wing movement and the consequence for different sections of society, That on one side. On the other hand, you had the practitioners, people actually fought against this Islamist movement and religious rights, or in different countries. They came together, and suddenly there's this sort of united front. You could feel there was this buzz of united practitioners, people who have fought, people who've actually been facing these groups with people who historically criticized religion. They came together, and you could see the explosive nature of this joint and united front, that you could see that in a conference. It was very clear for me.
Yeah, and I think one of the other important points was the fact that how key women are in this movement against the religious right and for secularism, and how much, we talk about the impending revolution in Iran being a female one. I think that is a reality in many places, that it is women who are taking the lead against the religious right, and women who are really at the forefront of this fight in many instances.
And we've seen women being the first target of these right-wing groups always, and in any different countries and all religion, women are the first target of these groups, and the ones who actually step by step they fought this new political phenomena that we've seen. And naturally, they're the ones who have experienced all of that, and they've actually very clearly leading this movement. And I think this is a great feature of the secularist movement. It's quite a female sort of movement, and I think this is very good.
Yeah. Well, let's go and listen to a closing address. It's one that I gave at the conference, which basically asks the audience, and including the speakers who were there, to adopt a manifesto for secularism. And you'll also see what the manifesto is about and hear its main points. Let's go and look at a clip of that, and then we'll be back to discuss it further. Stay with us.
Next is Mariam Namazi, who read us the manifesto and ask people to vote. Welcome, Mariam.
Okay, hello everyone again. This time I'm not going to cry like a baby. Sorry. We wanted to publish a manifesto for secularism out of this conference as a way of showing people the way forward. You've all seen the manifesto. It's all in your guidebooks. I'm not sure if I need to read it. I just want to go over a couple of points that were raised. One is the fact that this is about fighting the religious right. It's not about fighting a religious revival, that these are far-right, fascistic political movements that we need to fight back. And the consequences of neoconservatism, neoliberalism, communalism, cultural relativism have all aided and abetted and created a climate in which these groups such as ISIS, have been able to rise. We've given examples of these groups in the manifesto. Some might say that ISIS is incomparable with any other group. Some will say that even Al-Qaeda seems moderate compared to ISIS. What we're trying to say, though, is that fundamentally, given the fact that there are differences in every phenomenon, differences in degree, that fundamentally all these groups belong to the extreme right, and we should recognize them as such. What we're also saying in this manifesto is that we have to recognize the huge amounts of resistance that have been taking place against this religious right, and in defense of so many of the values that have been abandoned for so very long. It is us that has held this banner up high. So what we're doing is we're calling on people everywhere, from this room to the world, to join us in an international front for secularism. As we mentioned earlier, the Islamists, the religious right, are an international movement, so are we. They are strong, we are stronger. So we have come up with 5 points. The first is not more important than the 5th. These are 5 points that we can all, as secularists, religious or not, anti-religion or not, agree on.
and that is the complete separation of religion from the state, and with secularism as a fundamental right. We have groups like Human Rights Watch telling us that it is not internationally recognized right. We don't care. It is our demand and a right for all of us. We're saying that we want religion separated from public policy, from education, from healthcare, from scientific research, and these are just examples. We're saying that we want the abolition of religious laws in the family, civil, and criminal codes. That includes apostasy and blasphemy laws. And we're demanding for an end to discrimination against and persecution of LGBT, religious minorities, free thinkers, women, ex-Muslims, and others. We're asking for and demanding for the freedom of religion and atheism, and freedom to criticize religion, and that belief is seen as a private affair. And we're demanding the equality between women and men and citizenship rights for all. I ask you now to show your support of this manifesto by clapping. My lovely friends and comrades. Oh my God, I'm going to get emotional. This has been a very inspirational and a really proud moment in my life. And I think I can honestly say that this is a conference of heroes. And it's a conference of activists speaking about so many issues that are matters of life and death for so many people across the world. As we've all heard, the threats are very real. The threats are very real, and not just for people living in the Middle East or North Africa or South Asia, but also for many people living here in the West. The threats are real, but the resistance is real too. And oftentimes I think the threats are so real because the resistance is there. And our resistance is such a threat to the religious right that they have to use violence and murder and mayhem in order to impose their rule. I think what we've shown at this conference today is that despite the threats, we are strong and we are many. And that while we might have disagreements, which we discussed at the conference, we agree on some very fundamental things. And that is that for us, humanity has to be at the center. For us, citizenship is important, irrespective of people's beliefs. And for us, universalism means something. They're not Western values, they are values for all of us. And for us, secularism is important, the complete separation, not the wishy-washy British version of secularism. But secularism, laïcité, the complete separation of religion from the state means something. It is important. It is not the end of everything. I'm a socialist. It's not the end of everything, but it is a precondition, and it is urgent, and it's important. This banner might have been abandoned by many, but it has been fought for tooth and nail, day in and day out, over decades by many of you and many across the world. This is a fight that will continue. We will move onwards towards an international front. We are strong today. We will be stronger tomorrow. Thank you again for coming. I love you.
The experience has been amazing. Have a good evening because your weekend is gone. And have a good fun. Thank you, and thank you to Maha. Where's Maha? She's still around there. She is. Lovely. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Good night.
enjoyed the video of the conference. I really like what Terry Sanderson, who's president of the National Secular Society, said about the conference. I mean, he's he's heading a secular society, and he said that he's never been to a secular conference like this. And he said that there was this sense of imminent change and momentous change that was taking place at that conference, with women heading it. And I think that's so key about what this movement is really about, and what a lot of people haven't seen, and what this conference helped make people see.
I think you're right. Terry Sanderson captured that essence of the conference beautifully. I think that's very right. And you could see the buzz in the conference, and people who've gone back. You could see the feedback that we're receiving. It's very positive, and people are just asking us, when is the next year? And some people have talked about annual conferences. So I'm not sure about the ability us to be able to maintain this sort of annual conference, but momentum has been generated, and I think, as you mentioned, there is a requirement for international front. Secularists everywhere, they need to recognize they have a historical duty to face off the right-wing religious groups and movement. And as A.C. Grayling said, secularism is a human right, and people need to recognize, and that needs to be written on every, on a banner of every movement, in the same way that people ask for the right to apostasy, the right to criticizing religion, the right to the view to express the views and freedom of expression. Secularism needs to be written up as part and parcel of basic and fundamental human rights, and I think that's a great sort of issue that A.C. Grayling has raised, and I think the secularist movement needs to take notice.
I mean, definitely. One of the things about the conference is that it's not an end to anything. It's actually the beginning of a much larger, much more militant international front for secularism, and it's basically, saying that this is who the religious right are facing, but we're going to be working. We're strong as it is, but we're going to be working together, and we'll be even stronger as a result.
I agree, and I agree. You could see that this movement has a lot of force. I mean, in Iran, we'll have women's movement. We'll discuss the issue of acid sort of throwing. You could see that the females are leading this movement under our force of secularism, and we need to recognise that as a movement. We need to recognise, and politically that needs to be represented somehow, and that's important for the secularist movement to take note. It can't just be a passive observer of the political events everywhere. It needs to have a say. It needs to be actively participating in every movement corner of the world where the religious groups are there, and recognise its role and leading role it needs to play. When we say aggressive, I think aggressive, as Terry said in his interview, it might be a bit negative, but an active interventionist approach in political changes that are taking place everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think people should take it upon themselves. The reality is that whilst the banner of secularism has been abandoned by many, it has been held up high by women and men across the globe. And this is a banner that is our responsibility in this day and age now to take forward. If we don't do it, it's not going to happen, and the religious right will only get stronger and stronger. It's up to us, in a sense, which is also, it's scary, but also very wonderful at the same time. And it's, there's huge potential. There is a great force of just humanity out there who are defending, who want to defend it. And the Manifesto for Secularism and this international front is one way of doing that. So I suggest that everyone who's watching this sign up to the Manifesto and join this front. It's important. It is a historical task, and we will all have been part of it. Let's now go to the shocking news of the week. This week's shocking news is about a concerted effort by, the Islamic regime of Iran's thugs to throw acid in the faces of women in Isfahan. There are reports that at least 15 women, up to 15 women, have had acid thrown in their faces for being what is called bad hijabi, or being badly veiled. And, it's just it's so painful for, of course, the women who've been attacked. You know, they're driving in their car with their windows open, some of them, and they've had acid thrown in their faces. And, you know, some of them have been disfigured, lost their eyesight, and just horrendous, you know, this sort of attack. But also what's been wonderful is the response. People's response in Iran has been outstanding, and there have been demonstrations, not just in Isfahan, but in many other places as well. And there's a lot of wonderful slogans in defense of women's rights. One of them says, you know, if throwing acid continues, there will be tumult in Iran. And I think we need to add to that there'll be tumult across the world if this continues.
And I think that's the response to. I mean, can I just say a bit about the background to this? In the last few months, the Islamic regime has actually have shown they failed to deal with the women's sort of right and the general population who are not adhering to the Islamic sort of dress code. And they've tried time and again different methods, and nobody's paying attention to them. You know, they tried sort of groups to come and advise people, force people in various ways. Women have been arrested, taken to prison, you know, with no effect. And actually, Islamic regime lost control. The Islamic vigilantes, backed by the Friday prayer in mosques, they've actually said, you know, the only thing that they can do to deal with this issue is to violently get involved. And this is that's the result. Now, because of the backlash in the Iranian society, there's a huge demonstration the other day, last week in Iran, that followed by the call for Saturday and Sunday demonstration.
October 25th and 26th.
And that people, everybody went out. Went out on demonstration. And internationally, there was, you know, huge demonstration across the world. And we could see that the Islamic regime heads started to retreat from the position. Oh no, we didn't say this actually. This is not what we meant. They are retreating and sort of eating back, you know, and actually taking back what they've said. But this is not the end of it for Iranian society and women's movement in Iran. You know, people said the security on the streets. It's you know, there have to be security on the streets. We can't have vigilantes on the streets, roaming the streets and attacking women. And this is a great sort of response from the Iranian population to
We're going to talk about this a bit more in the Insane Fatwa of the week as well. But we just want to tell everybody that there is an international day. There was on the 25th of October. That won't be the last day in support of women in Iran and in opposition to throwing of acid in women's faces. So keep your eye out on actions that are taking place and do get involved in supporting women there against this brutality. Let's now go to the Insane Fatwa of the week, which is related to this issue. Stay with us. Now, in this week's Fatwa segment, we want to talk about what's happening in Iran and this women getting acid thrown in their faces. Now, the government has backtracked and is pretending that this is the act of individuals, but the reality is that they've had a huge role to play. They are directly responsible for what's happening. One, when you look at the sermons by Friday prayer leaders, one of them in Isfahan, where this crime is taking place, had said that the only way to deal with badly veiled women is to use a wet stick and to increase the forces of wrath and basically violence against women as a way of suppressing them. And in the government right now, in the Islamic Assembly, there is a bill that is being discussed which gives authority to people to be able to carry out, the government's role in stopping women who are badly veiled, supposedly, and penalizing them for it. And what it is, obviously, it's not normal citizens, but it's their own mercenaries. It's giving them, legalizing it.
They're legalizing the Islamic vigilantes. They've always, we know that Islamic vigilantes in Iran, always backed by the government. They're all linked directly to the Sepah and the military forces, and they have an official organization. They're all funded by the various government institutions. But now the bill in the parliament is trying to legitimize all of that, and they said that people have the right to go into and they're defining the private sphere as very, very limited. In your own bedroom, you know, hallway in your house is not, in your car is not private spaces. You know, these really, they've wiped out any private space and privacy that people have, and allows the new bill allows all the vigilantes to go on the streets and start actually do anything they want, including violence. And that's the issue, and this is the background. So the huge rise in the agitation and publicity by various government officials and various institutions in the Islamic regime that actually created this atmosphere, as you read from the Isfahan Friday prayer leader or imam, who's actually said, you know, the only thing left to us is to use violence because they've lost control of
and in a sense,
women.
this is how they imposed veiling on the women of Iran as well, through violence, through throwing acid in women's faces, to attacking them, to beating them. And they think again that they can do the same thing, but they are sadly mistaken. The protests in Iran have shown that there is no way that people in Iran will tolerate this sort of violence against women. And the slogans are so humane, so pro people's rights. It is unbelievable, really. When we talk about secularism being a right and a demand, you can see that clearly in all protests, including in this one. I hope you enjoyed this week's program. We've reached the end of our program. Until next week, we hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll see you then. Goodbye.